All right. Well, hello. I am Zach, OG VSCO founding member employee, and I am delighted to be joined by Luciana Caselli. We have another video that we're doing about her work as a curator, but today I wanted to talk with her about building a portfolio because Luciana is extremely qualified to talk about this. She has her master's in fine art. She is a professor, a photographer, as well as being a curator here at VSCO. And so I'm really looking forward to picking your brain and gathering some knowledge about building a portfolio. Because I mean, this is something that I've struggled with. I'm just still struggling with it's never ending.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks for the intro, as always, Zach.
Yes. So maybe to start us off, I'm really curious to know, what is a portfolio not? We'll talk a lot about what it is, but I'm imagining that I've got it wrong in some ways, and probably a lot of people are thinking about this wrong. So just help us like dispel some misconceptions.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing I see, I'm putting my brain into the professor context because I see a lot of portfolios in my student work, right? Working with students, I should say, is that it's a catch-all for all the work that you've ever done, ever. And I think that's the common misconception, is that it needs to be packed full and it needs to have all the options that you can do as a photographer. That's one of the main things I would say that it's not. And it's more of a kind of partial archive of some of your work. And that archive can be pulled out and changed. So you're going to have multiple portfolios. So that's another thing too, is that people think I'm just going to have this one portfolio. That's why I got to put everything in it to showcase the range that I have as a photographer. But in reality, you're going to craft multiple portfolios depending on the job you're looking for, the client you're talking to, that kind of thing. So looking at it more as like, maybe a resume is the wrong way to think about it, but something like that where you're tweaking it a little bit to every time so that it fits whatever it is that you're looking to do with it.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I think I've definitely been guilty of just trying to make it like my greatest hits in some sort of a gallery or something. And sounds like that's very unfocused, not what it should be.
And that's good to have that. Maybe that's something for yourself as like an archive that you can then go back to that pool and pull out stuff to make your, individual portfolio as you expand from there. But yeah, just think about if somebody were to set a huge, book of images in front of you, you're going to only be able to get through so many before you start to kind of peter out. So yeah.
So you kind of alluded to this a little bit, that your portfolio might change, even like almost thinking of it as a resume. So it almost sounds like there's different audiences for a portfolio, and I'm curious to know, who are those audiences? Like, obviously, if I'm a wedding photographer, it's people that might hire me, but I know the art world is massive, and a portfolio might have a lot of different audiences that maybe people aren't aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you touched on it. The number one spot that the kind of portfolios live in are, potential clients. But those potential clients can be a range of different things. They can be, people that are getting married that want to hire you for that. They could be a company that is looking for your, specific images for their coffee shop, a small business, or even a huge corporate company, something like that. But some of the things people sometimes often forget about is your fellow artists or your peers, or other educators that you want to show this to. Maybe you're trying to get a teaching job, or or you're wanting to work or collaborate with a fellow artist. You have your portfolio ready for that. Also, galleries and museums, you need to have a portfolio to present that to those spaces in order to get representation, if that's where you want to go towards too, as well.
That one's interesting. I mean, the other ones that you mentioned, I'm more familiar with, but galleries, I have no concept. Museums, of how that works. Like, are galleries and museums just like on the internet looking for photographers, or like how does that work? How would they find your portfolio?
Yeah, I think museums are a little bit tighter, but galleries for sure, they post kind of call to actions or artist calls all the time. And you can find them by going to the specific galleries websites. They often have like a call for creatives or call to artists tab, and you can go in there and it will say, we're having an upcoming show based around this theme, and we're looking for artists, visual artists, whatever, to bring work that matches that theme. And so then you fill out the application, send in your portfolio, and sometimes it's a little bit of a fee to drop your work in there, but sometimes it's free. And some museums do that as well. It depends on how big or small those museums are, but some smaller museums will tend to do open calls as well, call to artists.
Interesting. So it's more like you proactively sending your portfolio and less of
Yes.
them just finding you.
Yes. There is some of that, but it is a little bit less. I would say
Yeah.
maybe museums are doing a little bit more of the like finding you.
Mm.
But one word of caution is don't just, if there is no call to action, unless you know somebody or you've talked to somebody at the gallery, don't just like randomly send your stuff.
Right.
Because sometimes that kind of puts people off, or they're just so busy they can't even look at it. So just wait. If you want to be in this gallery, just wait till they have a show or go to a gallery opening and kind of talk to the people that are there, and
Right.
then get your foot in the door before sending your stuff over too.
Right. Okay. Great to know.
Yeah.
So let's say that you know your audience and now you're sifting through all of your images. How does a photographer build a compelling portfolio?
Yeah. First off, you're thinking about that client first and foremost. Like, where is this going to live? Who is going to see this? That way you can pull images that are relevant to that potential client or that audience. But you want to be really, really curated on that collection of that work, even though you're still already kind of narrowing it down. Like, let's say you're doing a wedding portfolio. You're not going to put all the weddings you've ever done. You're going to put your top picks in there.
Right.
And then you want to make sure that it's maybe showing a reflective kind of journey of your current and your past, whether that's your interests or your experiences as a wedding photographer. I'm just going to use that as the example. That way you can say, you can show this is some of the work I've done, 10 years ago as a wedding photographer, but this is also some of the work I'm doing now. You still want to focus heavily on what your style is now, as that's the most relevant.
Right.
But maybe there's something you've done in the style of the way you shot weddings a while ago that particular client loves, and they want to lean a little bit more into that.
Right.
So showcasing a nice range, but not everything, but still making sure you're kind of getting both of those in there.
Yeah.
And then obviously quality over quantity. I can't stress that one enough. And then, diversity in your style, right? You're showing that you have that diversity, but you're still maintaining like your cohesive voice or your aesthetic that you have throughout, right? Even if it's changed, making sure that, this is still true to who I am. So don't put images in there that you're like, I didn't really like having to do that, or that technique was really hard for me or whatever, or you just didn't like it. Don't put those in there, because of course that's going to be the one thing that they hone in on, and then they want 100 pictures that look like this thing that you don't really like doing, right? And then update your portfolio regularly, so don't forget about it. Maybe you're putting stuff in a folder for later, but you're just like, this one's great, this one needs to go in my portfolio. So your wedding portfolio or whatever needs to stay up to date, right? So keeping it fresh, keeping it current. I think that's another way to make sure that you're kind of showcasing your skill set too, because your skills are constantly evolving and changing, and you learn something new, you get a new camera, you're just evolving. You want to make sure that stuff is in there too, so they can see it as well.
Yeah. You mentioned something about, your style, and it got me thinking as you were talking. I feel like, especially when you're getting started, it's hard to even know what your style is. It's 1,000 different things, and it's a lifelong journey sometimes to just discover who you are and what you like, and it's constantly evolving and changing. Any tips on finding your style, on honing your style, and making that portfolio that you make really clear like that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I would look for is when you feel the most comfortable, like when you're shooting, like there's going to be these moments of calm, or where you don't feel anxious or nervous or whatever. You just like, I'm going to go do this thing, and you go do it, and it comes easy and it comes naturally.
Yeah.
That is probably some sort of, that is happening for a reason. There's a reason, whether it's the subject matter, whether it's that particular camera you're using, location, model that you're shooting, whatever. And then when you feel that, go, oh, write that down, mark it down, something, and just
Yeah.
kind of reshoot those things over and over again, even if they don't end up being used for anything other than you just getting more practice with that thing
Right.
that makes you comfortable. That's super helpful. And then just know that it takes time. Like you can, like if you're first starting out as a photographer, your portfolio, it is what it is right now, and be confident and that's what it is right now. But know that as you keep evolving, it's going to change. And that's why
Right.
you update your portfolio consistently so that it doesn't, you don't feel held back by it. You know, your skills are going to constantly evolve.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
good.
yeah.
I'll just throw in for myself and my own journey. One of the things that I identified a long time ago was noticing the images that I connected to. Like when I'm
Hmm.
scrolling through, a feed or somebody's work or something, like just noticing what really jumps out to me that makes me go
Totally.
like, oh, I wish I could do that, or I love that. Because I started noticing like, oh, there's kind of a consistency here, and there's a bunch of things that I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, but if I
Hmm.
actually look at that kind of work, I realize like I don't really love this. And just discovering like what do I like seeing in other people helped me figure out what do I want to be myself. And then my portfolio started to look like that more and more. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. You can use other artists as inspiration too, right? You can
yeah,
use like, oh, I see this person doing this work. Maybe let's try it out for myself, like you were saying. Oh, and then you might do and go, oh, that's not really me. Or you go, oh, wow, this is where I kind of want to lean into. So,
right.
um, the more work you're looking at that is not just your tunnel vision of artistic view is going to inform the way that you work as you keep going. So,
Yeah. Okay, so let's say that we've self-curated a really ruthlessly high quality portfolio, and now we're kind of putting it together. Any
mhm.
tips about like ordering, pairing, theming, that kind of thing? I mean, my mind goes to like, music days of, like the stats about how quickly people make a judgment of a song on a radio. It's like 3 seconds or something. And so I've always kind of thought about that with photo portfolios too. Like, oh, you gotta get them with the first one and then kind of create this like journey or something that they walk through. But I don't know, like, is that real, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is real, especially like on our phones with social media, in the digital space. We have a small window of attention span that folks are in, and so that's why I would say, obviously, you want to start with some of your strongest images or the images you love the most right off the bat. But then also maintain some of those ones that you love throughout your portfolio. Don't just like hit them with the first like three or four, then those are your best, and then your rest of your portfolio is stuff you're not really interested in. So, spread those out and get a couple in there to hook us, and then we're going to look through the kind of rest of it, right, to maintain that interest. Also, think about really interesting pairings that
Mm,
you've maybe never thought about before. So you don't always have to put the same shoot together or the same subjects together or the same models, whatever it is. You don't always have to do that. You can use contrast or complementary works to kind of highlight each other's strengths. So there's something about putting things next to each other that never were supposed to be next to each other that can
um,
create this really cool narrative or relationship, a color, tone, that kind of stuff that you just never thought about. So that's something to really kind of focus on. Is they don't have to be, this one shoot, I need to put them in order. It doesn't have to be like that.
yeah, yeah,
And then theming, right? You can still do that too. Is like if you want to talk about weddings or portraits or whatever, and you put those together, you can definitely do that. It helps for somebody that's maybe looking at your portfolio that isn't really versed in art or isn't versed in verbiage around art. So they might want to say, I just want to see your portraits. I just want to see your still lifes or whatever. And that's
yeah,
easy
yeah.
for them to go to that spot and digest that. But then there's also this other side of it too, depending on the client or who you're, showing this to, is that you might want to kind of choose descriptive words for those themes or those galleries, so to speak, or subsections of your portfolio that like are a little bit more memorable or might like show an emotion, that they're not just the stamp that we all know, which is, portraits, landscapes, whatever.
Yes.
That's hard though.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, you got to remember who the client
Yeah.
is.
Oh, I've definitely. I mean, I'm in the middle of trying to revamp my own portfolio right now, and I have some categories, but I feel so basic just calling it like travel, portrait, and I'm like trying to come up with more interesting names. But then I've been on other people's portfolios where it's like earth, essence, air, and you're like,
What?
what am I clicking on right now? Like, I don't even understand what this means.
Totally.
Maybe I'm just like thinking about Avatar too much or something, but yeah, so it sounds like you're saying consider the audience and kind of who you're going for and what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, and you can always, there's a way to kind of maybe do a little bit of both. You can have those like more traditional themed, umbrellas, and then inside of that umbrella you could maybe have a small little description that it goes into, the more like conceptual thoughts that you were having behind those particular images. So it can say landscapes, but then you go in there and you say this earth essence inspired me to to do this or whatever.
Okay. So you could kind of have both.
Yeah, you can have
That's
both.
good.
Yeah, people are their attention spans are short, so keep it short and sweet too. But I think there's a way to have both. Yeah.
You did mention like showcasing a breadth of work, and I was curious about this too. I've seen, we all know photographers who are very focused on one thing, but then sometimes you come across people who it's like they do weddings, they do landscapes, they do real estate, they do product photography, they have still lifes, and it can be a little overwhelming, but it's also inspiring. I guess, like, how much is too much? How do you think about what parts of your work to show and not to show, depending on your audience?
Well, when I think about a portfolio, I think of it more as the pared down side of it. And then I think of like things like a website or like maybe your VSCO profile or something where you have a lot more images and a lot more range of things there. But then your portfolio is maybe you're just sending them the link to the landscape tab or something like that, right? Or you're pulling that out and you're making plug for VSCO here, but you're making a space that just has one of the portions of your, overall arch and work in there so that client can, see what you want them to see too. So I think there's always a place to make sure you have your work as that larger archive, but just when it comes to getting work or getting hired or whatever, or collaborating, you might need to hone in on some of that, depending on the person or whatever.
I mean, it feels like it goes right back to what you were saying at the beginning, that you should almost think of it like a resume, and it depends on who the audience is. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, before we wrap up, anything else that I'm not asking or that we should know? Any other thoughts that you have?
Oh yeah, thinking about your portfolio, however it's going to live. One of the little tips I would suggest, especially because we are 90% digital, even if you're shooting film, a lot of time people are scanning and creating the digital file, right? Is get yourself some cheap prints of the images that you want to put in your portfolio and lay them on your floor, put them on your wall. They don't have to be high quality. It's enough to, just some Walgreens prints or wherever, some random store that prints them for 10 to 50 cents,
Yeah.
Because having them printed out, you can arrange them in a totally different way than when you arrange them in like Lightroom or on your computer screen. And you might see a relationship between things that you never saw before. And you can have, 30 little images laying in front of you and just kind of play with them that way too. So,
oh, that's brilliant.
Print them out.
Yeah, there is something about like organizing things spatially in a physical space that it's like our brains access a different compartment or something that enables you to see things and do things. Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm saying that, but I'm guilty of not doing it.
Yeah, we all are guilty of that, I think. Yeah. And then one last little thing is, it's funny, I think of things as we just are here, but giving yourself or your viewer a place to pause too when they're looking at your work, whether that's putting in colored page in between your, images or something, a little bit of text or something that they have to stop and click so then they pauses to go to the next thing, because having that like visual like reset before they're looking at more images is really helpful. And it also That way the viewer doesn't get into a routine of like, I know what's coming next. I know what's coming next too.
Right, right. Oh, that's good. That's good. Wow. Thank you. This has been amazing. Yeah, so much wisdom. Really appreciate your time. Would love to know if, if any of you have additional questions for Luciana. I mean, she is a guest here, but I mean, she's an employee too, so we can ask her more questions and maybe do another one of these if there's enough questions. So let us know if you have additional questions, and get started curating your work and building a portfolio. I'm excited to see what comes of this. So thank you all, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.